Somewhere in ancient Mesopotamia, around 2500 BCE, a scribe pressed a stylus into wet clay. The marks he left were cuneiform, wedge-shaped impressions, one of humanity's oldest writing systems. Scholars have spent centuries deciphering what these tablets say. Most of them record grain harvests, legal disputes, royal decrees, but some of them record something else entirely, something far more personal. One tablet, translated in 2023, contains a line that stops you cold. My upper lip becomes moist just thinking of you. That line is 4,500 years old, and it is describing a kiss. When you read it, something strange happens. It sounds like something you could text to someone tonight, which raises an immediate question. How long have humans actually been doing this? When did the kiss begin? The honest answer is, we don't know exactly, because lips don't leave fossils. Intimacy doesn't preserve in stone. But science has found a way to trace it anyway, through the DNA of our closest relative, through the behavior of animals who share our ancestry, and through the earliest written records of human longing. What they reveal is stranger than you'd expect. The kiss is older than our species, and it is not universal. This is the story of how it began. Before we get to that Mesopotamian tablet, we need to sit with the difficulty of the question. Kissing leaves almost no physical trace. Bone survives, stone survives, clay survives, but the soft tissue of lips? Gone. Always gone. There are no kissing fossils. So how do researchers even approach this question? They use 3 different lenses. First, comparative primatology, looking at what our closest relatives do. Second, genetics. What shared microbes and DNA can tell us about ancient contact? Third, the archaeological record, text, figurines, and art that reference kissing. None of these 3 lines of evidence gives a clean answer on its own. Put together, they build a picture. And there's a word for the scientific study of kissing: philematology. From the Greek, philema, a kiss. It's a surprisingly serious field. Researchers have studied the neuroscience of the kiss, its evolutionary history, its cultural variation, and the more they look, the stranger the picture gets. So let's start at the very beginning, not with humans, but with our ancestors from a very, very long time ago. We're going back 21 million years to a world before the first humans walked the earth, to the Miocene epoch, to the common ancestor of the great apes. Because that is where, by most estimates, the story of the kiss actually begins. Not as romance, not as desire, but as grooming, as touch. The Miocene was a world of warm forests and early apes. Georgia, our planet's primate family tree, was branching into new forms. Georgia, and among those forms, were the ancestors of what would become the great ape. Georgia, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and eventually, Georgia, they all share a common ancestor. Georgia, and that ancestor, by most estimates, lived somewhere between 21.5 and 16.9 million years ago. This is the number that comes from a landmark 2025 paper by Brindle, Talbot, and West. Their analysis of primate behavior across species placed the origin of kissing-like behavior in this common ancestor. That means the behavior we call kissing is not a human invention. It predates humans by millions of years. But what does kissing even mean in the context of ancient apes? It starts with grooming. Grooming is one of the most fundamental social behaviors in primates. Apes spend hours each day moving through each other's fur. They remove parasites, dead skin, dirt. But grooming is also about far more than hygiene. It builds trust. It repairs relationships. It calms anxiety. In primate societies, who you groom and who grooms you is a map of social bonds. And when you groom, you use your lip. The fingers separate the fur. The lips follow. They brush against the skin, feeling for anything that shouldn't be there. At the end of a grooming session, the groomer often ends with a final press of the lips, a lingering contact, lips to fur, or lips to skin. This is what researchers call the groomer's final kiss. The hypothesis, proposed by primatologist Adriano Lamera in 2024, is that human kissing is a direct descendant of this behavior. When early humans lost most of their body fur, full grooming became impossible. But the social behavior associated with grooming, the bonding, the trust building, the physical contact, didn't disappear. It concentrated into the face, into the lips, into the areas of skin that were still exposed. What we now call kissing may be, in essence, what remains of grooming, the final gesture, preserved because it still served a social function. This is a hypothesis, not established fact, but it's a compelling one, and it's consistent with what we see in other apes today. Chimpanzees kiss. They press their lips together in what researchers recognize as a clear kissing behavior. They do it after conflicts, to reconcile. They do it as greetings, as comfort, as bonding. Bonobos kiss even more frequently. In bonobo society, physical contact, including what looks unambiguously like kissing, is a primary social lubricant. It's used to diffuse tension, build alliances, express affection. Orangutans, too, have been documented engaging in lip-to-lip contact. These are 3 separate primate lineages, all descended from that Miocene ancestor, and all 3 kiss. The parsimony principle in biology suggests if the same behavior appears in all branches of a family tree, it was probably present in the common ancestor, which means the lip-to-lip contact is, conservatively, millions of years old, and it likely didn't stop with apes. What about Neanderthals, our closest evolutionary cousins? The humans who weren't quite us. They lived alongside Homo sapiens in Europe for tens of thousands of years, and they likely kissed. The evidence comes from an unexpected source: oral microbes. Researchers have found that modern humans and Neanderthals shared specific strains of bacteria and viruses that live in the mouth. Shared strains imply shared contact. Mouth-to-mouth contact. Kissing. Or, at minimum, close enough contact to exchange saliva. But let's come forward in time, to the first anatomically modern humans, the ones who looked like us. Homo sapiens emerged somewhere around 300,000 years ago. By that point, the evolutionary machinery for kissing was already ancient, but early humans faced a specific challenge that may have given it a new dimension. We lost our fur. Compared to our primate relatives, modern humans are nearly hairless. When you lose fur, you lose the substrate for traditional primate grooming. You can't run your fingers through fur that isn't there. One proposal, and it is a proposal, a hypothesis, not established fact, is that this created a kind of behavioral redirect. The grooming impulse didn't disappear. It found new outlets. One of those outlets may have been what anthropologists call pre-mastication, or kiss feeding. Before baby food, before blenders, before stone tools to mash food effectively, there was a simpler solution. Mothers chewed food to a soft paste and transferred it from their mouths to their infants' mouths. This is documented in multiple human cultures and is widely practiced today in societies without access to processed infant food. Maria chimpanzees do it too. Maria, the theory holds that this mouth-to-mouth transfer, combined with the grooming heritage, may have been one pathway through which lip-to-lip contact became normalized, and then, potentially, emotionally loaded. The problem is, this is impossible to prove from fossils. Maria, we can't observe what early humans did with their mouth. Maria, what we can observe is what they left behind in clay, stone, and text. Maria, and the first clear written record of kissing doesn't appear until much, much later. Maria, we have to fast forward. Maria, from the Miocene forests and the prehistoric camp, Maria, to the earliest cities. Maria, to Mesopotamia. Maria, to the fertile valleys between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Maria, to a civilization so early that it barely had a name for itself. Maria, but it had a name for what it felt. Maria, and it pressed that name into wet clay. This is where the direct historical record begins, around 2500 BCE, around 4,500 years ago. Let's go there. Ancient Mesopotamia, the land between 2 rivers, is where writing was invented. Around 3200 BCE, the Sumerians developed cuneiform, wedge-shaped impressions pressed into soft clay. It was originally a system for tracking grain and livestock, accounting, record-keeping, commerce, but language is irrepressible. People turned this new technology toward everything that mattered to them, including love, including desire, including the body. The clay tablets that survive from ancient Mesopotamia include administrative records, yes, but also legal codes, medical texts, mythology, and love poetry. Real love poetry. Poetry that describes physical desire with an immediacy that crosses 4,500 years without losing anything. In 2023, researchers Toys Pank Abel and Sophie Lund Rasmussen published a study in the journal Science, Their paper reviewed the cuneiform record for the earliest references to kissing. What they found pushed the documented history of romantic kissing back by at least 1,000 years. The previously accepted earliest record had been Sanskrit texts from South Asia, dating to around 1500 BCE. The Mesopotamian evidence predates that by at least a millennium. Tablets from at least 2500 BCE contain clear references to kissing. And the texts are not ambiguous. They describe kissing in the context of desire, in the context of love, and in the context of the body. One text, a love poem, contains a line that has become something of a landmark in Philly mythology. My upper lip becomes moist just thinking of you. It is a line that needs no translation of intent. Whoever wrote it was describing anticipatory desire. The physical sensation of wanting to kiss someone. Another tablet references a clay figurine that has been associated with kissing behavior. The British Museum holds a Babylonian clay figurine dated to approximately 1800 BCE. It shows a couple in what is clearly a kissing embrace. Their lips are pressed together. Their posture is intimate. It is, as far as scholars can determine, the oldest physical image of a kiss, and it still reads across 4 millennia as unmistakably human. But the Mesopotamian record goes further than imagery. The Akkadian language had specific words for different types of kissing. There was a word for the kiss of friendly greeting, a kiss between equals, between family members. And there was a separate word for the erotic kiss, the intimate kiss, the kiss of lovers. This linguistic distinction is important. It shows that the Mesopotamians weren't just kissing, they were categorizing their kissing. They recognized that the same physical gesture could carry different social meanings. A kiss hello, a kiss of passion. Different words, different contexts, different weight. This is sophisticated social behavior. This is a civilization that has thought about what a kiss means. The love poem from Sipar goes further still. It doesn't just mention kissing. It builds around it. It desires it. The speaker of the poem longs for physical contact in terms that are unmistakably erotic and tender at once. Reading it, you don't feel like you're studying an artifact. You feel like you're reading someone's diary. Researchers have noted that this quality, the raw familiarity of ancient emotional expression, is one of the most striking things about the Mesopotamian record. These weren't distant ceremonial gestures. This was private longing, scratched into clay. But here's a question the tablets also raise. If kissing was this widespread and emotionally rich in Mesopotamia by 2500 BCE, how much older was it? The tablets are the earliest written record, but writing itself is only about 5,000 years old. Everything before that is silence, at least from the textual record, which is why the biological and evolutionary evidence matters so much. The clay tablets are the first voices. The primates and the DNA are the older story. Together, they suggest a gesture that has been with us, in one form or another, for millions of years. But the story of ancient kissing doesn't stop in Mesopotamia. For most of the 20th century, the accepted answer to when did humans first record kissing was South Asia, around 1500 BCE, the Vedic period of ancient India. Sanskrit texts from this era contain references to kissing. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest texts in any Indo-European language, includes references to touching noses and inhaling each other's breath. Kadamahitha. Some scholars interpret these as descriptions of a gesture related to kissing. Muvdaheta. Later Vedic and Sanskrit texts are more explicit. Muvdaheta. They describe lip contact between people in terms of affection and desire. Muvdaheta. The Vatsyayana Kamasutra, written much later, perhaps 4th century CE, famously dedicates an entire section to kissing. Muvdaheta. It classifies kissing by type, by location on the body, by context, by meaning. Muvdaheta. It is an extremely thorough taxonomy of the kiss. Muvdaheta. For decades, scholars pointed to the South Asian record as the earliest clear textual evidence of romantic kissing. Muvdaheta. The date? Around 1500 BCE, approximately 3,500 years ago. Muvehetha, then came 2023. Muvehetha and the Arbel Rasmussen paper in Science. Muvehetha. Their review of the Mesopotamian cuneiform record found evidence of kissing behavior in tablets from at least 2500 BCE. 1,000 years earlier. This pushed the South Asian claim out of first place, but it didn't erase it. The South Asian record remains important for several reasons. First, it represents an entirely independent tradition. The Vedic texts didn't borrow their kissing references from Mesopotamia. They developed separate. This independence matters. It suggests that kissing arose in multiple regions without being spread by contact alone. Second, the depth and sophistication of the South Asian treatment of kissing is unparalleled. No other ancient civilization produced a document as thorough as the Kamasutra's chapter on kissing. Third, the South Asian record connects us to the question of whether romantic kissing spread through cultural diffusion or arose independently. The evidence suggests probably both. Some traditions arrived through contact, others grew on their own, and one civilization had a particularly systematic approach to codifying it. Ancient Rome was a civilization obsessed with classification, law, status, ritual. It should be no surprise that the Romans also classified their kisses. And unlike the Mesopotamians, who left us poetry, the Romans left us terminology, a formal vocabulary of the kiss. 3 words, 3 categories. The first was osculum, from the Latin for little mouth. The osculum was the social kiss. A kiss on the cheek or a light press of the lips in greeting. It was the kiss you gave a colleague, a distant relative, an acquaintance of sufficient status. The osculum was about respect and social acknowledgement. It was not intimate. It was code. The second was basium. The basium was a kiss on the lips, but not an erotic one. It was the kiss of affection. The kiss between close friends, between family members who were truly close. The basium carried warmth, but not desire. The third, and most charged, was savium, sometimes written as suavium. The savium was the lover's kiss, erotic, intimate, not for public display. The Romans were quite specific about the social contexts in which each type of kiss was appropriate. You gave an osculum to your senator. You gave a basium to your brother. You gave a savium to your lover. Crossing these categories was a social transgression, and Roman literature is full of men and women who cross these lines, who steal kisses, who are given the wrong kind, who refuse or demand. Catullus, one of Rome's great love poets, wrote entire poems about the kiss. His famous Dammi basia mille, give me 1,000 kisses, is still quoted today. But the Roman kiss was not just about love. It was about power. Roman law included provisions about kissing and its social meaning. In some periods, a man's social status could be read by the kind of kiss he was offered or received. To be kissed on the hand was one thing, on the cheek another, on the lips another still. And crucially, the right to kiss and to receive kisses was tied to citizenship, to family status, to rank. The kiss was a social technology, a way of signaling and enforcing the hierarchies that held Roman society together. This is worth pausing on, because it points to something the Romans understood intuitively. A kiss is never just a kiss. Here's the moment where the story takes a sharp turn. Everything we've discussed so far assumes kissing is universal, that all humans kiss, that it's a basic biological behavior, like smiling or crying. That assumption is wrong. In 2015, a team of researchers led by William Jankowiak published a study in the American Anthropologist. They examined 168 cultures from around the world. They were looking for romantic sexual kissing, lip-to-lip contact in an intimate context. Their finding was startling. Only 77 of those 168 cultures, just 46%, had any tradition of romantic kissing. Less than half. Prior to this study, the conventional wisdom, repeated in popular science articles and textbooks, was that roughly 90% of human cultures practiced kissing. That number turned out to be a significant overestimate. The 2015 study corrected it substantially, and the geographic pattern of who kisses and who doesn't is illuminating. In the Middle East, 10 out of 10 cultures studied showed romantic kissing. In Asia, approximately 73%. In Europe, approximately 70%. In North America, approximately 55%. But in sub-Saharan Africa, Central America, and New Guinea, the numbers dropped dramatically. Many cultures in these regions had no tradition of romantic kissing at all. And it wasn't just absence. In some cases, the reaction to kissing was active disgust. The Thonga people of southern Africa, when first shown kissing by European missionaries, reportedly described it as eating each other's saliva and dirt. The Mehinaku of Brazil found it actively unappealing. The Trobriand Islanders of Papua New Guinea did not kiss romantically. In Trobriand courtship, the gesture of intimate contact was biting, not kissing. They bit each other's eyelashes during intimacy. These examples are not exotic curiosities. They're evidence that kissing, far from being a universal biological behavior, is, at least in part, culturally learned. A habit, a tradition, something that gets passed down, not something that simply emerges. So here's the double paradox at the center of this story. On one side, the kiss is older than our species. It traces back millions of years to the common ancestor of the great apes. It was practiced by the relatives we share DNA with. It may have been practiced by Neanderthals. In the evolutionary sense, it is ancient. On the other side, the kiss is not universal among humans. Nearly half of all human cultures across history had no romantic kissing tradition, and some of those cultures found kissing actively repulsive. How can something be ancient and yet not universal? The answer lies in the difference between a behavioral potential and a cultural practice. The capacity for lip-to-lip contact is ancient. The lips are sensitive. They're loaded with nerve ending. The neural hardware for reading meaning in mouth-to-mouth contact is very old. But the specific cultural practice of the romantic kiss, the framing, the symbolism, the ritual, that is not automatic. It has to be learned. It has to be transmitted. And different cultures have found different ways to express the same underlying needs. The need to bond, to signal trust, to express desire. Kissing is one solution to that need, but not the only one. Some cultures nose rub. Some cultures bite. Some cultures press foreheads. The behavior differs. The underlying impulse is the same. This explains the geographic pattern. The cultures with the longest and most complex urban histories, Mesopotamia, South Asia, Rome, China, the Middle East, tend to have the richest kissing traditions. The correlation that Jankowiak and colleagues found was between romantic kissing and what they called social complexity. More urbanized societies with more stratified hierarchies, more developed concept of romantic love, those societies tended to kiss. Less stratified societies with different structures of intimacy, they often didn't. This doesn't mean one is more advanced, more loving, or more expressive. It means the kiss is a cultural technology as much as a biological one. It appears where certain social conditions are present, and this gives us a way to rethink the question, when did kissing start? There isn't one answer. There are at least two questions bundled into one. When did the lip contact behavior emerge? Millions of years ago. When did the culturally loaded, romantically specific, linguistically named kiss emerge? Somewhere around 2500 BCE at minimum, probably earlier. But that's where the texts begin. There's also the myth that needs to be retired. The claim that 90% of human cultures practice kissing was wrong. The real number, from the most rigorous study available, is closer to 46%. The higher figure was not the result of deliberate deception. It emerged from decades of Western-centric research that assumed its own norms were universal. If you study kissing primarily in Western or Middle Eastern societies, you'll find kissing is nearly universal. Zoom out to include the full range of human cultures, and the picture changes significantly. The implication is important. Kissing is not hardwired in the way breathing or crying is hardwired. It is, at least partially, a habit. A beautiful, ancient, deeply felt habit, but a habit nonetheless. One that some of our ancestors invented, refined, named, and passed down. And one that a significant portion of humanity, past and present, never adopted. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive finding in the entire field of philometology. The thing we associate most with universal human connection, the kiss, is not universal at all. It is particular, historic, contingent. So if kissing isn't inevitable, if it's not a biological reflex like sneezing or blinking? Why did it persist in the cultures that adopted it? What is the kiss actually doing? Biologically, chemically, neurologically, what happens when two people press their lips together? The answer, it turns out, involves several overlapping systems. Kadya, the first is the most straightforward. Information. Kadya. The human mouth is extraordinarily sensitive. Kadya. Lips contain a high concentration of Meissner's corpuscles, specialized touch receptors that detect pressure and texture with great precision. When you kiss someone, you are sampling them. Kadya. Their health, their immune status, their stress hormones. Kadya. All of these leave chemical traces in saliva and on the skin. Kadya. Kissing allows this information to transfer. Kadya. There's evidence that humans can detect genetic compatibility through kissing. Kadya. Through chemicals called MHC molecules. Kadya. Markers of immune system profile. Kadya. People tend to find the scent of those with different MHC profiles more attractive. Kadya. A mechanism that may promote genetic diversity in offspring. Kadya. Kissing, which brings faces and noses into close proximity, may be a way of sampling this information. The second system involves bonding hormones. Physical contact, especially pleasurable, consensual physical contact, triggers the release of oxytocin. Oxytocin is the neuropeptide associated with bonding, trust, and social attachment. It's released when mothers nurse infants, when people embrace, when communities engage in synchronized physical activity. Kissing triggers oxytocin release. This may be why it feels like more than just physical sensation. It creates a neurochemical sense of closeness and trust. It's also why the groomer's final kiss hypothesis makes neurobiological sense. Grooming in primates triggers oxytocin release. If kissing is grooming's evolutionary residue, it may have retained the same neurochemical function. The third system is more complicated, the microbiome. The human mouth harbors hundreds of species of bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms. Some of these are benign, some are protective, some are pathogenic. Kissing transfers these organisms between partners. In the short term, this creates a shared oral microbiome. Couples who kiss frequently have more similar oral microbiomes than couples who don't. Whether this is beneficial, neutral, or harmful depends on what's being shared. And here, the story gets complicated. One virus that researchers have connected to kissing is HSV-1, herpes simplex virus type 1. HSV-1 causes oral herpes. It's extraordinarily common. By some estimates, up to 2/3 of the world's population carries it. Some researchers have suggested that the spread of kissing behavior may have contributed to the spread of HSV-1. Importantly, some ancient Mesopotamian medical texts describe symptoms that match what we'd recognize as HSV-1 infection. But researchers are careful to note, this is a hypothesis, and a contested one. The Mesopotamian medical texts cannot be read at face value, as researchers put it. Diagnosing ancient diseases from ancient texts is notoriously difficult. Symptoms overlap, descriptions are vague, interpretive frameworks differ. So the HSV-1 hypothesis, while interesting, should be held lightly. The honest framing. Some researchers suggest kissing may have accelerated the spread of certain oral viruses, but direct causation has not been established. What we can say with more confidence is this. Kissing is a behavior that survived because it serves multiple overlapping functions simultaneously. It conveys information about health, about compatibility. It triggers bonding hormones, strengthening social attachment. It signals trust, because pressing your face to another person's face is an act of radical vulnerability. It communicates desire in a way that is specific and unambiguous, and it maintains connection through the ritual of repeated physical acknowledgement. None of these functions is unique to kissing. There are other gestures in other cultures that do the same work, but kissing does them all at once, and it does so with an efficiency and an intensity that may explain why it became so widespread in the cultures that adopted it. Once a behavior delivers this kind of payload, oxytocin, information, trust, desire, connection, it tends to stick. It gets named. It gets rituals built around it. It gets written into poetry, into law, into religion. It gets pressed into clay. Which brings us back to that scribe in Mesopotamia, pressing wedges into wet clay. Writing, my upper lip becomes moist just thinking of you. So, when did humans start kissing? Let's be honest about what we can and can't say. We can say, lip-to-lip contact behavior appears in the common ancestor of the great apes, at least 16 to 21 million years ago. We can say, this behavior was almost certainly present in Neanderthals. We can say, by 2500 BCE at the very latest, humans were kissing in a way that felt significant enough to describe in writing. We can say, the cultural practice of romantic kissing correlates with social complexity and is not biologically universal. What we cannot say. There was one moment, one culture, one couple who started kissing. The question, when did kissing start, is the wrong question. It assumes a clean origin, a point in time before which there were no kisses and after which there were. But behavior doesn't work that way, especially a behavior that has this many layers: evolutionary, neurochemical, cultural, linguistic. What actually happened is something more like this. A gesture of grooming slowly became a gesture of bonding. A transfer of food became a transfer of trust. A press of lips in a Miocene rainforest became a line pressed into Mesopotamian clay, and that clay line became a category in Roman law, a chapter in a Sanskrit manual, a lyric in 10,000 love songs. And in some parts of the world, it never made that journey at all. Which makes the gesture, when you think about it, even more remarkable in the places where it did. It wasn't inevitable. It was invented, and reinvented, and refined across thousands of years of human beings trying to find ways to say something that words alone couldn't quite reach. The Mesopotamian scribe who wrote, "My upper lip becomes moist," wasn't the first person to feel that, but they were the first person we know of who wanted to record it, who wanted to preserve that feeling in something harder than memory. Which means that somewhere in ancient Iraq, 4,500 years ago, someone understood something we still understand, that some things are worth keeping. If this made you look at a familiar gesture in a new way, that's what this channel is for. Hit subscribe, and we'll keep doing exactly that.